The University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Center for Agricultural Profitability serves agricultural producers, agribusiness, and the economy in Nebraska and beyond. The center's focus is on the financial health of agriculture and supporting informed decision-making through research, extension, and education. We're building on the strengths in UNL's Department of Agricultural Economics through collaboration with other disciplines across the university and the industry, because the issues facing ag today cannot be solved alone.
The center is a place that producers can look at to find help with their decisions, to find help with those things that they are facing, that they need material, they need tools in order to make the kind of decisions that they need to make almost on a daily basis.
I'm Jay Rempe, Senior Economist for Nebraska Farm Bureau. But no matter what producer I talk to, one of the things that comes across is the difficulty and the complexity of managing a farm or ranch operation today. Some of the things that farmers and ranchers have to deal with today would just make your mind spin. And that's what excites me about the Center for Ag Profitability. Producers are asking for tools to help them manage their operations, help them make the risk management decisions that they need to make. And that's what the center can bring. They can provide the tools and the resources that producers need to manage successfully in today's ag economy. I applaud both the Department of Agricultural Economics and the university for creating the center. I think it'll do a lot of good things for our producers in this state for many years to come.
You know, the decisions that we make can play a huge part in, really how the bottom line and how profitable farms and ranches are these days. Whereas I think in the past, we could have gotten by with a few mistakes, whereas now we really can't do that. And I really see the Center for Ag Profitability as having the potential to really significantly increase the financial and business management skills of Nebraska's ag producers by providing applied research, decision tools, and educational programs required to manage the multi-million-dollar enterprises we see today.
Hello, my name is Bob Campbell. I'm a Senior Vice President with Farm Credit Services of America, and I'm based in Lincoln. I'm really excited about the launch for the Center of Ag Profitability and the impact that I believe it's going to have for farmers and ranchers and agribusinesses across the state of Nebraska. As we know, in today's environment, with the volatility that we see year to year, the changes in inputs and supply chains, the decisions that have to be made today are larger and seem to have to be made faster than they have in the past. The Center for Ag Profitability is uniquely positioned to develop that set of tools and resources to help producers and agribusinesses deal with today's business environment. It's a good day for production agriculture in the state of Nebraska, and I'm really excited again about the launch of the Center for Ag Profitability.
The center's website at cap.unl.edu is home to tools such as the Nebraska Farm Real Estate Report, Custom Rates Survey, and the new online agricultural budget calculator. The site offers resources centered around management topics such as finance, marketing, ag policy, farm transition, leasing, and much more, and publishes several new articles and podcasts every week.
My name's Kara Perdue. I'm a mom and a farmer in York County. Farming and ranching is definitely a way of life, but it's also a business. And when you are working on the day-to-day operations, there's not always a lot of extra time to do a bunch of in-depth research to help your business. And that is where the Center for Ag Profitability is really going to come into play. It's going to kind of bridge that gap that sometimes can occur. There's a lot of great up-to-date information that's happening right now at the university, and the center is going to get that information right out to farmers and help make your business not just profitable, but really successful for not just this year, but also years to come.
The center kind of acts as a magnet or a rallying point, a focus point, shall we say, for people from all disciplines to come together. When we talk about profitability, that's something that rings in a lot of people's ears, not only producers, but also individuals from other disciplines. People, when they look at us, when they hear Center for Agricultural Profitability, they know immediately in their minds what it is, what our objective is, what it is we're trying to do to help them.
Good afternoon, and thanks for joining our webinar. I'm Larry Van Tassel, head of the Department of Agricultural Economics and director of the new Center for Agricultural Profitability at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Today is just our second webinar as the Center for Ag Profitability, which continues the work of our Farm and Ranch Management webinar series that has been going since April of last year. We're very pleased today to have one of agricultural's most popular and effective speakers join us to discuss the importance of business and financial IQ in the 2020s. Dr. David Kohl is Professor Emeritus of Agricultural Finance and Small Business Management and Entrepreneurship in the Department of Agricultural and Applied Economics at Virginia Tech in Blacksburg, Virginia, where he taught for 25 years. He is also a member of the university's Academic Hall of Fame. Dr. Kohl received his master's and PhD degrees in agricultural economics from Cornell University. He has traveled millions of miles throughout his professional career to conduct over 5,000 workshops and seminars. With his decades of experience navigating many economic cycles, Dr. Kohl's knowledge and wisdom about the dollars and cents of agriculture provide tools, tips, and takeaways that offer a proactive approach to managing ag businesses in the 2020s. Dr. Kohl, thanks for joining with us today.
Well, Larry, it's a pleasure and an honor to be with you, and I'm really excited about the Center for Profitability. I really think that it's going to be very appropriate for the decade of the 2020s. Let me kick off by saying this is actually my 199th webcast or Zoomcast that I've done since March 2020. We've not only done those throughout the United States, but Canada, and actually we've done quite a few of them now worldwide. So it's been very, very exciting trying to get your hands around what's going on in global economics. I will say I'm back on the road again. I was in Manhattan, Kansas for my 34th Nebraska-Kansas Ag Banking School, and we had 52 agricultural bankers, 24 from the state of Nebraska, and I taught for 3 days, and I was telling up front that almost 75% had less than 2 years of experience. So we got a whole new realm of agriculture and agricultural lenders out there. Well, let's get right to it. And let's talk a little bit about the business and financial IQ and the difference maker. And I've got 3 objectives here for you today. Number 1, I would like to go up 30,000 foot and talk a little bit about some of the aspects that are going to be influencing the business and the financial IQ. And again, there's a lot of moving parts going on in global economics. Second, I want to give you some tools that you can actually take home, that you can implement in improving your business and financial IQ. And then I'm going to end with the 7 points, I call it fueling the phoenix, that I see many successful agriculture producers doing. Right up front, Fargo, North Dakota last week, one of the things a producer asked me, is this profitability temporary or is it permanent? Yeah, I was right up front and said it's permanent for the agricultural producers that have a high business and financial IQ. In other words, every year it's not going to be profitable, but it's going to put the odds on their side. It's going to be temporary for a number of those that just focus on production probably don't place emphasis on business and financial IQ. So with that being the backdrop, let's go into some of our PowerPoints. And one of the things that I would just suggest to you is this. We're into what we call roller coaster economics, and the importance of business and financial IQ from a business standpoint, but also from an emotional standpoint, is very, very critical. One of the things that you'll find on this roller coaster, the peaks get higher, the valleys get lower. Let's go back about 12 years ago when we were in the great commodity super cycle from 2008, 2013. We had a convergence of events that drove us to $7 corn, beans in the teens. Everything was doing well. Basically, the emerging nations, the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, South Korea, Indonesia, Mexico, and Turkey, their purchasing power parity doubled in 15 years. And what did they do? They demanded food, fiber, and fuel. Of course, agriculture in rural America, that is right in our wheelhouse. Also, we saw the growth of the ethanol industry. We had a weak dollar because we were in a recession on the coast. And then we started this weather in extremes, and that, followed by low interest rates, gave us 5 years. And by the way, these super cycles, often, they don't occur very often. Matter of fact, since 1910, we've only had 3 others. And then around 2013, we started going into those slow-go years, the grinder years. And one of the things that happened was we had trade uncertainty, strong dollar, and then intensity and global competition picked up. But then one of the things that we started noticing on the income statement, cash flow, more money was coming from the government. Then around 2020, I was gearing up January, February 2020 for some really possible tough year. And then the pandemic hit. And when the pandemic hit, it moved us into kind of a mini super cycle. Many people think it's a permanent super cycle. I think it's a mini super cycle. And it reminds me of an athlete that's on steroids. You had the central banks, not only here, but around the world, move to accommodative action to kind of lessen the impact of the pandemic. And then government started doling out money. Think about this, $2 billion a day in 2020 went to agriculture throughout the world. That's not the United States, that's throughout the world. And also we wrote checks. Think about this, on an $85 trillion world economy, 14% of the world economy was a stimulus check. And when you combine those with China rebuilding its protein complex, and then of course our weather issues in the Southern Hemisphere, now here in the Western part of the United States in the upper Midwest, and then of course we had the supply disruptors out there, and then we had the Federal Reserve speeding up a money supply, M2, very, very similar to the 1970s. What we have is this mini super cycle, but I want to warn you, I believe this is short term in nature. Now, how important is this? I want to tell you something that happened at the banker school. We had one of the bankers that teaches with me down there. He said this is the first year in his 34 years of banking, every customer had a positive earned net worth. Did you hear that? Positive earned net worth. But then we started digging in a little deeper. One of the things is government payments as a percent of income. If we look at the United States, 2016, 21%, and you can kind of see through the grinder years, but look at this, 2020, 61% of the net farm income came from a check from government. And my whole contention is when you start looking at those financial ratios, I had an upper Midwest banker tell me that his average customer had a 248% coverage ratio. In other words, coverage ratio is your debt service ability to your debt service payments. When he stripped out the government payments, that dropped to 114%. And what I'm saying right now, if we don't have those government payments, but if they're cut 25, 50, 75%, how does it impact your plans in your business? So government came to the rescue. It's not permanent. And I think we have to have a plan after that. And that's going to take a strong business and financial IQ. Now, the next big thing that's hitting us right now, inflation. I was telling Alicia, I was going through the airport in Kansas City, a sandwich and a little juice almost cost me $19. Inflation is definitely in there, whether it's candy bars, whether it's gasoline. And a lot of folks ask me, is this inflation temporary or is it permanent? The temporary would say, well, China is rebuilding its protein and manufacturing complex. And of course, we got these supply chain disruptions. Of course, we've got all these stimulus checks. And if you really look at consumer savings here in the United States, above their normal savings plan, $2.8 trillion on a $21 trillion economy is pent up savings. And by the way, in the airports, I am seeing those people, I call it the Disney crowd, is definitely out there, traveling. And so this is creating inflation. Of course, I talked about the money supply and wages and unemployment. Government wanted $15 minimum wage. They got it. How did they do it? Extend stimulus checks, extend unemployment, and basically businesses had to raise their wages. And so that's creating this temporary inflation along with the weather extremes. Now, one of the things that I would suggest to you as agriculture producers, when you start looking at your financials, the back half of this year, we got to be really careful that the margins don't go upside down because inflation has kind of kicked in. And again, a lot of folks bought their inputs of 2019, 2020. Now, when we go to buy the inputs, it may be a whole different ballgame. And if you really look at it, I think you need to keep an eye on about four things. Watch the Federal Reserve as far as money supply. Right now, we've got too much money chasing too few goods. If that continues, you're going to have permanent inflation. Also, the other thing is watch United States and worldwide consumer confidence. It's going to be real critical. And if this consumer stays confident, it's going to carry inflation over into 22, 23. Of course, we've got the outbreak of this Delta virus, and that may shake up the confidence. We also got to watch our central bank interest rate policy. The Fed's kind of hinting that they're going to increase interest rates. How quick, how fast may impact. And of course, the government budget and tax strategies are going to be real critical. And the more and more wages increase, the more and more we may automate. So these are some of the things that we've got to look at. But here is the point I'm trying to get across. Inflation, when you look at your financials, it exponentiates outcomes. And, told a group in Fargo the other day, the decisions that you make today, whether they're good, bad, or ugly, compound themselves over time, but then inflation exponentially compounds those. And that is why, like the center, some of the tools and techniques that they're introducing, cost of production and some of those aspects, you have constantly got to be on top of it in an inflationary environment. And so again, I know they've got a lot of new great stuff coming out, but what you got to do is implement it and monitor it. Very, very critical. Now, here's my long-term concerns for the ag economy. I don't see too much emphasis on trade and export markets. And that's very concerning to me because if you look at 1 out of every $5 of net farm income comes from export markets. The other aspect that I'm seeing, and again, I'm picking this up as I work globally, the rise of competition of China, particularly through their Silk and Belt Road Initiative. And so competition's picking up, and we've got lack of emphasis right now on government or government as applied to trade. Now, one of the things that I think we're going to have to watch throughout this decade is China and the Asian Rim. Think about this. In 1990, I can remember coming out, matter of fact, one of our first schools was out there in Kearney, Nebraska. And at that time, banking school, and if you think about it, China was 2% of world GDP. Look at it today, 2019 says 16. I just got the latest updated figures, 17% of world GDP. Initially, they took world market share from China, or excuse me, from Japan and Europe. Now they're got their scope set right on the United States of America. Now, the next big question is, how are they doing it? Number one, they want to unseat the United States as kind of the global leader in globalism and move to a more regionalization strategy. You think about it, you go regionalization, the Asian Rim potentially will have about 33 to 40 cents of every dollar to be spent in global economics between, around 2030 to 2040. China wants to be the leader in that area of the world. Second thing China is doing, it's called its dual circulation strategy. They want to unseat the United States as the global leader. They want to become the regional leader. But the second thing is they want to get the Chinese citizens consuming more. See, in the United States, 70% of our economy is driven by consumption. They're 55.5. This morning, as I was working out, one of the things that was real interesting, China's consumer is starting to come back on board. And so they want to drive that toward 70%. The other initiative is they're celebrating their 100th anniversary of the Communist Party. And one of the things that President Xi did was initiate the Silk and Belt Road Initiative in 2013. 68 countries since then. There's been $1 trillion of infrastructure loans. Many of them are competition, Brazil, Argentina, Eastern Europe. Now they're hitting the medical innovation. So we're going to have to watch that real closely. And as far as trade agreements, I'm extremely disappointed. I'm just telling it like it is. We did not participate in the TPP or Trans-Pacific Trade Agreement. See, last fall, China was and is a big part of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. It represents 2.7 billion people, 25 of $85 trillion. But look at your global trade value, 12.5 trillion. Well, we ratified the USMCA, Mexico, Canada, United States, very significant agreement. We have not made any overtures toward the TPP. And what's going on? There's a global buzz. If the United States doesn't come in there, then China may come in there. Now, you're saying this is all big picture stuff. This is the stuff that can influence your financial ratios very, very quickly, your profitability, your balance sheet, your land values. And so one of the things is we've got to watch these agreements very, very closely. By the way, about 3 weeks ago, the administration was in Europe. They came up with the B3W, Build Back a Better World Partnership, United States and Europe. And this is kind of a counter to the Silk and Belt Road Initiative. It's going to be interesting to see what China's counter strategy is to that strategy. So bottom line, this global economics means that volatility and extremes, uncertainty, and that places a premium on working capital and financial liquidity. And this whole thing in profitability analysis, financial sensitivity analysis. Now, the management mindset of the 2020s. And I really want to drill down here. And I like to pull off the FinBin data, University of Minnesota, it's in 22 states. And one of the things that's real interesting, accrual adjusted statements. And by the way, one of the worst management practices is managing your business off a Schedule F. I hope you all heard that. But we always have a top 20 and a bottom 20. But you saw during the super cycle, the top 20% of producers, and they're not necessarily the biggest, they really, really benefit. But you'll see the bottom 20% consistently is above zero, except late in the super cycle, that bottom 20% popped up to profitability. Now, I'm going to come back to that in just a second. Now, this looks at businesses as far as farm size, gross farm revenue, and then net farm income. And what you will see is, when you're down there under $500,000 worth of revenue, you could have off-farm income to carry out. You could have some equity to carry you out. But boy, once your farm business goes 500, $1 million, $2 million dollars worth of revenue, it's not difficult to get that. What you will see is the gap spreads. And one of the things that's real interesting is this, the 2020 data. We just got this out. What you will see is in 2020, the top 20% made considerable money. But what scares me, and it's just like the super cycle, the bottom 20% are making money. And I want to say it right on this webcast and for the Profitability Center, in my decades of working in this field, when the bottom 20% of any industry starts making money, you're usually going to have problems 2 to 3 years ahead. And so one of the things that I would just suggest to you is 2 points. As your businesses get bigger, that business and financial acumen has to kick in. And when it kicks in, it really, divides the top 20, top third, and the bottom third. But right now, the government payments basically have rewarded poor management, or not necessarily poor management, but maybe a lack of emphasis in management. Maybe I'm a little bit too harsh. That is not going to be permanent. And so again, it's interesting to look at this data. One of the things I think is real critical for any business, of course, we have the dairy creamery, we have the dairy farms here in Virginia. The financial dashboard is real important. Oh, it was so exciting. We had a farmer panel the other night at the banking school. And by the way, one of the producers was from Nebraska. The other one was from Kansas. And you know what they said? One of their most exciting times is when they get their financials, and then they can compare them to financial benchmarks. And I want to stress to all of you, develop your own dashboard. Keep it to 5 or 6 ratios. This is not necessarily the gold standard, but one of the things I would just suggest to you, I go back to 2009 to 2020, and let's look at the coverage ratio, the ability to cover your debts. What's real interesting? The bottom 20%, it's under 100%. That basically means they are not generating enough for their debt service. What's real interesting, and again, look at your average farm this last year, 274%, up from 148. But look what happened in the grinder years. They were having difficulty meeting their financial payments. This is where government gave that temporary infusion. And so again, it's going to be interesting to see what happens in 21, 22. But your top 20%, they're consistently above 200%. Look at your rate of return on asset. You can see these. Here's the point I'm trying to get across, and it's something at our Profitability Center I think is real critical. Developing KPIs, key performance indicators in financials and financial benchmarks is real critical. It's critical not only for communication within the family, but communication with your lender. It might be your farm business consultant, your extension person, et cetera, et cetera. So one of the key points is developing those dashboards. Now, I want to hit the big one here, financial business IQ. In my career, which has expanded a number of decades, hopefully this will be one of the top 10 things that I've done over my career, was develop this business management IQ assessment. Now, is it perfect? No, but it has 15 questions that you ask the business for crucial conversations. First of all, do you know your cost of production? Do you know it via enterprise? By the way, the center now has budgets for both of those areas. Simple little thing called goal setting, cash flow and financial sensitivity on the cash flow, family living budget. And I'm just going to share with you, a family living budget is just as important as a farm budget, particularly when you have multiple family members living out of that business. You know what's really going to kick in with the change in the tax laws is transition business owner transition plans going to be real critical? What type of education, seminars and courses? And then it comes down to attitude. I got to tell the story, and I've told this hundreds of times. I was in Fort Wayne, Indiana, doing a seminar and crop and livestock seminar, and I had breakfast with a large animal vet. He was 84 years of age, very opinionated man, kind of like large animal vets. I loaded some steers with a large animal vet this morning, but he's not opinionated. One of my former students, he bought some of our steers. But what's real interesting is this. I invited him to my seminar that afternoon. He sat right in the front row and took a lot of notes, came up afterwards and said, boy, I really enjoyed your seminar, but I'm totally disappointed in your business IQ. He threw me for a loop. And I says, well, what's wrong? He says that line 15 needs to be line number 1, because he says as a large animal vet, I'd recommend protocols. I would recommend, producers do this, that, and the other. He said the reactive and indifferent attitude. He said I was constantly out there on emergency work. And he says they wanted a magic silver bullet. I want you to be thinking about that. Okay. He said, one of the things about the attitude of the proactive, they were trying to incrementally get better. Incrementally get better. Well, I had to come back to him with a response. And I says, well, sir, I saved the best for last. And we both laughed. But he's exactly right. He said, you see all of these? This is that mindset. Do you have that attitude that you want to incrementally get better? And by the way, there's no magic silver bullet. A few years ago, hemp was going to save the world. Right now, government is saving the world. What I'm saying, post-hemp, post-government, one of the things following this business IQ is going to be important. Now, I tell you this. Over a decade, your top third that follow this business IQ, they'll make money about 6 out of every 7 years of the 6 of 7 years of the 10-year period. There's going to be 3 years that we have weather problems or something happens in the business, you aren't going to make money. Now that bottom 20% that doesn't follow the business IQ, I give them the 2 and 10-year rule. 2 out of every 10 years, markets line up and everything lines up and they make lots of money. The other 8 years, they kind of depend on government and land equity that's appreciated to bail them out of their poor management decisions. But the critical point comes when a son or a daughter or a younger partner comes back into the business and they try to do it like the previous generation. As a matter of fact, usually we will have some financial issues. This is a tool for the center. And by the way, Larry, you're welcome to use it anyway, any place. We've had over 1,000 producers actually fill this out. Now, it's real interesting. You fill out this business IQ, you come up with the things you want to continue, the things that you want to improve on. Never more than 3. Anything above 3 becomes too overwhelming. Now, it's real interesting. This is an important tool. It's a screener for attitude. Let's go to Mankato, Minnesota. Banker comes up to me and he says, I had a farmer come in, request a restructure, refinance of his debt. He says, fill out a projected cash flow for me and fill out this business IQ. You know what the producer threw his hands up? I can't do a projected cash flow, can't predict the weather, can't do this. It was kind of one of those, can't do this. And then he said, this business IQ, that's just that Kohl guy. It's academic. Don't need to do it. You know what the banker said under his breath? This guy's going to be finding a new home. It's a great way. And by the way, I will not work with a farm family that want use this because it's a waste of my time. It's called opportunity cost. And one of the things is keep that in the back of your mind. Have each family member fill it out separately. That's a key because you're going to get that dominant family member that's going to try to put all the input, and then you bring them on in together. You do this incremental improvement. By the way, the lenders are actually using this because they can actually take this completed business IQ and take it to the loan committee or the credit analyst, or guess who was in our seminars? The regulators that oversee the banking industry. They really like this as a tool. Now, internally to the farm family, this can facilitate discussion. and oftentimes between family members. Now, the customer or the family member develops it for improvement, and you can measure your progress year over year. Larry, I was out in North Platte, and of course, I spent a lot of time in the state of Nebraska. I also enjoy it. And I had a young producer that's followed me over the years. Young, well, I consider 40 years of age young now, but he came up to me just before COVID shut us down. I was doing a seminar out there, and he showed me his business IQ from 5 years ago to that year. He'd improved about 5 or 6 points. He was so proud. His spouse was there. His banker was there. I says, "Did it impact your bottom line?" He says, "Oh yeah." He says, "My profits went up. You know why? Because it helped me focus on some of the things that I really needed to improve." Now, this is an example of a farm family I worked with last fall, large farm family, crop livestock, about 15 million in revenue. I went down on a Tuesday, socially distanced, and visited with them. And I asked them to fill out the business IQ. And I says, "Have it to me by Friday." Comes Friday, 5 o'clock, no business IQ. I told Alicia, my business associate here, I says, "Well, that's another wasted day of my life. Somebody must have tweeted the bird out there, because 8 o'clock, or it was between 8 and 12 Monday morning, it was complete." You know who filled it out? The daughter. And this is how you fill it out. Now, you know what's real interesting? The husband gave himself a 53. You can't get a 53. He graded himself a 4 for attitude. You can't get a 4. And his wife was a 39, daughter 38, the CFO or accountant was 40, and the lender was 35. It's real interesting. Lenders sometimes will grade the businesses higher than the producers. Sometimes the producers are more critical. This kind of gives you an example of how you can use this. Matter of fact, we had a half-hour discussion in the banking school on this situation right here. If you were a banker, what would you look at? But it really helps on the communications. Now, you know what's interesting in this case? In this case, we had 2 sons that didn't fill it out. Why? Because they were involved with production. They didn't think they were involved in business and finance. You know what I told the farm family? I says, "They are your Achilles heel." And by the way, one of the sons is gone now. Okay, he's gone from the business. And one of the things is the other son is kind of changing his attitude just a little bit, but it's very, very important to fill this out. Now, the big question comes, Larry, it was real interesting. About 4 years ago or 3 years ago, I had a freshman from the University of Kentucky, was the son of Dr. Steve Isaac. He's an ag economist out there. His name was Ben Isaac. He and another young person attended the banking school down at Clemson. And I hinted to him, I says, "Boy, Ben, I would really like to have somebody do a study linking the business IQ to the financial performance." Lo and behold, we get an email last fall. He took me up on it, and he took 4 years of Kentucky farm record data that was accrual adjusted, and he actually had producers fill it out, and then they filled out the business IQ, and he kind of compared. Wow, did we get some results? What we found was the people that had the top third of scores compared to bottom third carried 3 times as much debt. And oftentimes they were doing a number of refinances because they weren't making money. Second thing, did it relate to profitability? Oh yeah, the top 1/3, they had about a 2 to 3% return. Bottom third just scraping by, and you'd say, "Well, that's not much of a return." Remember, this was 2016 to 2019 data, kind of those grinder years. You know what was real interesting? Net farm income. You can kind of see the results, 202, 109, 14, and 53. But the coverage ratio, the lenders really enjoyed this in the school. Top third had 114%, bottom third 10%. You have to have 100% to make your debt payments. And even the top third were kind of scraping by. But boy, definitely linked up. But When we take the operating expense revenue ratio, excluding interest and depreciation, top third, 68%, they had a 32% margin. Bottom third, 90%. Now, Larry, you'd appreciate this. Ben was going along in his study. It was getting toward the end of the semester, Thanksgiving. And I says, well, this is great. I want to know if it's statistically significant. So he worked with some statisticians in his department and everything. And you know what we found? It was significantly significant to the 95th confidence interval. And so in this study, we found a direct statistical relationship. I'm trying to, Larry, get Ben to go on to graduate school. He'd make a great student at the University of Nebraska, and we could carry this study on. That's a hint, and part of the Center for Profitability. So with that in mind, let's conclude in the final 10, 12 minutes here. And by the way, you got some questions. I noticed Dave Reinbot's on, and a few of the folks, I've noticed a few of the folks that have followed me over the years. I call it fueling the phoenix. And it's basically rising from the ashes. We had this pandemic. We didn't know how it was going to play out. And it's gone through various stages, the dirty bird, and then the angry bird. But I noticed a lot of businesses took the opportunity to really refine their business practices. And here are seven components that will help you move you toward the ledger of what I call permanent profitability, 6 or 7 of 10 years. And let's talk and let's discuss these. First of all, planning. 5 to 10% rule. 5 to 10% of your time needs to be in planning. But you not only need to plan, but you need to strategize, but you need to execute on the plan and then monitor the plan. It was said at the banking school, and I will say this, you cannot monitor your financials once a year anymore. You know why? Speed kills. There's too many zeros and too many commas. Things can get out of hand very fast. It was interesting. The two producers that were on our panel the other night, they're monitoring their financials quarterly. The one is monitoring them monthly, and they bring their banker in or their financial advisor in to get another set of eyes on those. Okay. Also, it's called the Hut principle. Hey, Nebraska football here, Larry. It is here, it's understand, but it's take action. A lot of people will not take action because there's consequences. May I remind you, there's consequences if you don't take action. I think one of the things in planning, you constantly got to do SWOT analysis with the industry, with the businesses, the total business, or a specific enterprise that you're looking at. But one of the things that we're really finding that some of our more profitable farms have formal or informal team of advisors to energize the process. And by the way, Larry, one of the things that we're finding now is we can use the hybrid approach. Matter of fact, I have been involved remotely now. I just Zoom in and I can be part of their planning meetings. And I've been doing it. We just did a producer group in Texas the other day. I have been approached by a group in upstate New York to do the same type of process. And so you're planning with this technology, you can bring others in, and sometimes you bring your peers in from other states. Keep that in the back of your mind. Now, projections. You know, top elite athletes, you know what they do is visualize outcomes. Matter of fact, good coaches like Coach, you know, the coaches that I got to be careful at, you know, University of Nebraska. One of the things, what they try to do is create a mindset, a visualization of outcomes. Guess what that is? That's your cash flow statement. Cash flow statement's 80% of a business plan. You know why? Because you got to think production, marketing, finance, operations, risk management. And one of the things is in an inflationary environment, you've got to overestimate both time and money by 25%. And I'm a big believer of best, average, and worst case scenario. I like the best case scenario because that's that carrot that you need to chase. But you also have to have that worst case scenario. But one of the things on your projections with this inflationary environment, you've got to expand the waistband because again, the parameters, we've been in a lower inflationary type of environment, lower interest rate type of environment. That is about, it is changing and it may change even more. So financial projections is the visualization of those outcomes. Now, here is something that's really, really critical. I don't know if you folks realize this, 82% of a farm balance sheet nationwide is in long-term assets called land. But one of the critical things that's going to be with volatility and extremes is being able to pivot, and able to pivot, you've got to have working capital. Working capital, we used to say is king, it is queen. It's kind, you know, your business is kind of like a chessboard with a series of moves. That queen is there for blocking strategies in adversity, but opportunity strategies when opportunities comes along. By the way, the young man from Nebraska the other night said, you know, his lender didn't tell him he had to do it, but he said, you need to build working capital. You need to build a cash component. The young producer said he resisted it. But then he says, you know, I kind of bought into it. He says, I've been able to buy 2 farms, take cash discounts, et cetera, because I've got a strong top half of the balance sheet. And he says, you know, I consistently have to have my banker remind me of that. Okay, how important it is. A couple of metrics: keep your working capital 5 to 1 of your principal and interest payments. Working capital expenses greater than 25%, but 30% of your working capital needs to be converted to cash within 90 days. Kind of keep that quickness to cash. By the way, in the household budget, 4 to 8 months of household expenses in cash. Critical in this environment for the 2020s, this business IQ, financial IQ, is the ability to have working capital. And let's go over to Omaha. And Warren Buffett doesn't keep $80 billion of cash around for nothing. In other words, everybody says cash doesn't earn me anything in the bank. Cash is that opportunity type of capital that's there, or it's the blocking capital as well. You know what the oxygen to your business is? It's profitability. I've got a 60-30-10 profit plan. 60% of your profits needs to go build efficiency before you grow. Better is better before bigger is better. 30% goes to build working capital. You're going to have to pay income taxes to build working capital. 10%, that's house money. But you know, one of the things that I'm starting to see some producers, that 10% becomes 60-70% are using it for house money. It can get you into trouble. Take your long-term, intermediate-term debt called term debt and divide EBITDA. All it is net income before interest, depreciation, and taxes. I like to keep it 5 to 6 to 1. Matter of fact, we sat down the other night with one of the panelists looking at buying a property next door. And right on a simple napkin, that was one of the ratios we were able to calculate. And we wanted to make sure we stayed, you know, below 6 to 1. A big one is, how much does it cost to generate $1 worth of revenue? You just take your operating expenses, excluding interest, depreciation, divide it in to the revenue, and you try to keep that less than 6 or 75%. Some of the peak performers are now less than 70%, but government payments has changed that. And it's not all bad to pay income tax. Very few businesses go broke paying income tax. Profitability is the oxygen to that business. Have a plan, try to stay, you know, if you're taking on term debt, try to stay within some of those parameters. Now, the pathway, the journey. Many businesses are going to see accelerated transition because what's happening is the tax laws are changing. And a typical business will go through the dream wonder, then they'll stumble, then they'll hit the thunder. And if they don't teach and share that business, share some of these financials, one of the things is the business is often destroyed. And so I'm a big believer that you got to take 1% of your equity or asset base, and it has to be invested in a transition plan with a team of advisors. Very easy to postpone this. And again, personal budgets really quickly. Now, hitting the 6P, it's real interesting. One of the things that's real interesting, people. It used to be, and I grew up in a German farm family in upstate New York. We were independent and we didn't want to deal with people. People skills, that's going to be part of your profitability center. It's more than numbers. You're going to be interdependent, and one of the things is you will grow on the type of people that surround you. Now, I am a big believer of good books to read. Good to Great by Jim Collins, a great book. And it has 6 perspectives. Get the right people on the bus, kick the wrong ones off, get the right people in the right seats. But then Coach K, the Duke University coach, says you got to have the right bus driver. The bus driver needs to know the directions. That's your business plan. And then you better have a plan B, C, and D, because you never know out there on Interstate 80 when you're going to have a construction, you might have to take a detour. And I think one of the things that we're going to really have to do is hold family members accountable. In other words, we can have job descriptions and all that, but we need to hold them accountable. And that's sometimes where your team of advisors are in there. By the way, who won a lot of those championship banners that are on Memorial Stadium? It was your role players. Your role players that sometimes were non-scholarship and came in your business. Remember, role players win championships. It's just not those superstars. Then the final part of the 7 P's to fuel the Phoenix is prioritization. And one of the things that I would just share here, you've got to know what your $100, $1,000, $10,000 a day decision. One of the lessons that we learned from the pandemic is we were overscheduled, work-life balance. I call it the art and science of farming. Larry, my new themes of my talks for 2021, 2022, Alicia suggested this. I'm going to talk about the art and science of lending and the art and science of farming and ranching because it's more than numbers. Sometimes it's the non-financial factors. But one of the things that we really found that the pandemic got us to think about other things in life. But you know what I'm finding in the airports? I'm seeing a lot of stressed out people again. They're trying to, enjoy themselves. And I just see a lot of stressed families, et cetera, et cetera. They're right back on the rat race again. And one of the important parts of that is goal setting. And again, business, family, personal, mental, physical, spiritual. The 6 degrees of goal setting. I'll hit this again. Business, family, personal, mental, physical, spiritual. The other thing is the 2,500, 500-hour rule. One of the things is try not to work more than 2,500 hours. I know you're moving irrigation pipe and, you got cattle to deal with, et cetera, et cetera. But again, 250 10-hour days, 50 10-hour days in outside organizations. You know what the meds of life is? Dairy of life, it's very, very simple. M stands for meaning, but to have meaning, you got to meditate. Shut your technology down. E stands for exercise. Take a good walk, do something. Exercise your brain, read a good book. D stands for diet, but I will have to admit, our ice cream is premium ice cream at our creamery. And I got home off the airplane and a pint turned almost into a quart last night. But again, watch your diet. But you know what the S is? Support network. And I think that's one of the things that's very, very critical. Your self-worth in life, your net worth in life will be equated to who you associate with. Just a subtle little thing. What's the dairy for life? I grew up on a dairy farm. We're in the dairy business. It's very, very simple. The D stands for discipline. Okay. And that's one of the things, having that business IQ, financial IQ, it takes a lot of discipline. You got to take time to do it. A stands for attitude and accountability. And boy, that's one of the things that I'm finding we're seeing a lack of accountability. I stands for initiative, innovation. R stands for voice of reasoning, hearing people out, being respectful. And then you know what why is? It's all up to you. And that's called the dairy of life. Those are the seven points to fuel that phoenix. So what did I do? I took you a big picture, gave you a few tools, and then I gave you 7 steps of fueling that phoenix. And so, Larry, it's about 53 after the hour. And one of the things I'd like to do is open it up for any questions or answers that we have. But first of all, I want to give a shout out to you, University of Nebraska, and all the supporters. Matter of fact, I was working out with Bob the other morning at 5:30 in the morning in the hotel. And so when I saw him, I go, my goodness, I was working out with him. But I really appreciate all the support that you're getting out there. And let's put it this way, this and all your other webcasts and your educational tools are going to be extremely critical. So I give you a shout out for that out there, Larry. So Larry, I'm going to open her up for some question and answer, and hopefully if I can't answer it, Larry, I'll leave it to you to answer.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate you being with us today. Just to remind everybody that if you do have questions, you can put them in the chat and we'll pass them on to Dave. We've got him for another 5 or 6 minutes here. Dave, what kind of questions are you receiving out there on the road?
Yeah, it's real. Oh, and by the way, Randy asked, I think this is being recorded. Is that correct?
Yes, it will be placed.
Yeah, Randy said maybe he can pick it up a little bit later, okay, and digest it. You know what? One of the questions I got up in Fargo the other day, I'm a producer. I made a lot of money in 2020. What should I do? And first of all, you need to do a self-analysis. How did you make the money? Was it the government? Was it a good marketing and risk management plan? Did we get a little speculative on the markets? Did we do that? Was it production and financial efficiency? Once you do that, one of the things that I'm really stressing is to build that working capital and that liquidity. So you've got the ability to pivot in 2022 and 2023. And again, go back and see how you made the money. And then I put emphasis on working capital and liquidity. And you know, Larry, sometimes they're going to have to pay taxes when they do it. I'm going to have Alicia here. She's my associate that's right next to me. Alicia, you asked me the question. This is Alicia Morris, the voice from my side here. Go for it, Alicia.
All right, here's another question for you. What is the one financial ratio that is most important?
By the way, get asked that question all the time. There's not one. In matter of fact, when you look at that dashboard, you have to look at it like a ball team. Say it's a basketball team or a football team. And one of the things is you might have strength in one ratio, but weaknesses in the other. And so one of the mistakes that we do is we just zero in on one ratio. I think it takes 4 or 5 of those ratios combination. But can I tell you, the panelists the other night had a high debt to asset ratio, but their coverage ratio, their financial efficiency, and their working capital was extremely high, which made them very attractive for financing to the banker. Okay.
Dave, we have a question for you here. Mm-hmm. When you say 50% for retirement, what is that 50% of and for how long?
Yeah, by the way, if you're in family business transition, one of the questions you have to ask the senior generation, where's your income going to come from in retirement? And it's called the Canadian 50% rule. I work a lot in Canada. And what they try to do is get their producers to have at least 50% of their retirement income coming from government pension like Social Security or investments outside the farm and the ranch business. And when that happens, you have much more flexibility in the transition. In other words, the junior generation doesn't have to carry grandma, grandpa, or mom and dad in the retirement. So it's a 50% rule. Can 50% of those retirement needs be generated outside the sale and the lease of the farm business? And Larry, you know what's happening in the United States right now? we're seeing a lot of farms getting broke up because this generation just wants to cash in so we got 5 or 6 family members. One stays on, the others are not there. And what's happened is it was a big trend mentioned up in North Dakota the other day. A lot of the I-state farms are now starting to get broke up because of this exact same thing. Okay.
Dave, I'll ask you a question. Whenever we visit with a number of producers about looking at cost reduction, developing those costs, the cash flow budget and that, they're so busy during the day out there working, doing chores, doing the farming, everything else, that one of the last things they want to do when they come in at night is to sit down at their books.
Yep.
How do you get producers to readjust those priorities?
Yeah, it's tough. And by the way, I get right into that because we're baling hay, doing different things. But one of the things is sometimes what you got to do is have someone hold you accountable. The extension person, maybe the lender, or the team of advisors. And can I share with you? You got to remember in rainy days, back when I grew up on dairy farm, that's when we did all those odd chores on a rainy day. Sometimes you take that rainy day and you devote some time toward those financials. But I find if you get someone out there to hold you accountable, it's kind of like us professors. We give that assignment and they follow through. That will really, really jumpstart. And you know what the other thing is? Continually to monitor, because what you will see is, how are we progressing or how are we falling back? So those would be 2 suggestions. First of all, measure it. But then second of all, have that outside person kind of hold you accountable. And I find that works. And by the way, sometimes they'll schedule a meeting. It might be July 22nd. Yeah, we got to move irrigation pipe and all that. No, we got to put this one in, and we got to do it in the high energy part of the day, not, at night.
Good. Well, Dave, our hour is up. We sure appreciate you spending it with us. It gave given us a lot to think about there, and we look forward as a new Center for Ag Profitability to try to help our producers in implementing a number of things that you have there. Yeah. We'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. A recording of the webinar will be posted at cap.unl.edu, where you can also register for other upcoming webinars. As a reminder, check cap.unl.edu for a schedule of more webinars from the new Center for Ag Profitability. Join us next week at noon for a look at the proposed 30 by 30 conservation plan. Thanks again for joining us. And Dave, look forward to seeing you again in Nebraska.
Oh yeah, hey, we'll be cruising on out to see you. I want to wish everybody well and stay healthy.
Take care.